Bahraini protesters on the streets again on the 7th anniversary of its popular uprising. Demonstrators are calling for resistance against Manama's harsh crackdown on dissent. The Bahrainis have kept up pressure on the regime since the revolution began in 2011, and protests have taken place almost daily. Meanwhile, 13 NGOs have sided with the people of Bahrain in the face of the government crackdown. This time, the NGOs have turned to Manama's Western supporters and the UN to pressure the Khalifa dynasty. The rights groups, including the Bahrain Center for Human Rights, Frontline Defenders, and the Gulf Center for Human Rights, called on the US, the UK, the EU, and the UN to pressure Manama into releasing detained Bahraini human rights defenders and prisoners of conscience. They've also demanded that the UN Special Rapporteur to visit Bahrain.
Well, NGOs are limited ultimately as they don't finally make decisions. Political decisions are made in the corridors of power across various political circles. A lot of those decisions are made on the back of lobbyists, professional lobby groups, who also act in the interests of corporations, state players, and other people with money who largely want to dictate how decisions are taken. So Bahrain and its NGOs are probably at the bottom of the pile. However, they must continue the fight because what else are you to do? You must lobby, you have to continue putting your argument forward, and with a little bit of luck, world pressure would build up, and the people, the right-minded people in the world will at least support you.
In their latest demonstrations against the Bahraini government, protesters expressed solidarity with Bahrain's top cleric, Sheikh Isa Ghassam. He, along with many other citizens, has been stripped of his citizenship. Bahrain has been the scene of anti-regime protests since 2011. The revolution turned deadly when security forces, backed by Saudi troops, used strong-arm tactics to quell the uprising. Many have been killed and thousands jailed for supporting the revolution. The crackdown has been going on for 7 years now. The Bahraini regime has not achieved its goals as demonstrations continue countrywide. The Bahraini government has refused to enter into talks with its opponents and has preferred to spend huge sums of money to silence them.
They don't want to come to the negotiating table. They don't want that on the agenda whatsoever, because if they came to the negotiating table, they have nothing in terms of legitimacy or in terms of integrity or in terms of a real ethical, democratic or shura-based proposition to put forward. What they are proposing is that they remain in power as an illegitimate regime of oligarchs, of kings who effectively, monarchs who control the overwhelming wealth and decisions of the country, with a few puppet so-called democratic, if you like, people operating within their levers of power.
Western governments, most notably the US and the UK, which are Bahrain's close allies, have not taken the least action to pressure the country over its rights record, nor has the UN been able to take any meaningful measures in this regard.
But at the actual reality of the coalface, that's all one has. The mechanisms of the UN, the mechanisms of the international, if you like, arbitration or dialogue are ultimately also financially controlled by the same forces which usually cause these problems. The US still finances the UN to far greater degree, yet the US is also the one in Bahrain, along with the British establishment, who's, and of course along with the Saudi Arabians, who's actually supporting the Bahraini regime's oppression of its own people.
Saudi Arabia has aided and abetted Bahrain in cracking down on dissent in the small Arab nation. The US and the UK have military bases in Bahrain. Despite the West's silence toward the dire situation there, Bahrainis are hopeful to bring about change in their country without help from the outside.